Greetings, ladies and melodians, and welcome to today's edition of RE191, where I take old stories I've narrated and update them to modern audio standards. This particular story is a 4-part series. I've done part 1 and 2, so check last night and the night before. And this is part 3, called A Human Nursemaid 3, written by Chimpanzee Writes. Florence swam in unconsciousness, jostled by the waves of memories. Spray and mist clouded her vision, making discerning her surroundings difficult. She shook her head and tried to roll over, but instead her body floated tenderless. "Miss Flo," the words were a sea foam in the waves. "Miss Flo, the baby's crying." It felt more solid that time, like something she should latch onto, but it was too fuzzy to make out. Just out of sight, hovering just at the corner of her vision, the baby. Florence shut her eyes open, then sat up so fast she knocked Hector over in the process. Quickly, making sure that Hector was all right, she reached over and picked up Millie, who'd been lying on the forest floor beside her. The pain in her shoulder flared up. It was hard for her to tell whether it was from the cold or the fact that the rest of her body hurt so much now, but the pain felt different, old. Grabbing food and water out of her bag for Millie, she directed Hector to do the same. After Millie was done eating, she took out her stick of butter. Millie hadn't eaten as much as Florence would have liked, but there was nothing to be done about that now. Unwrapping her butter, Florence stared at the unappetizing block of tepid yellow butterfat hesitantly, then took a bite. Flavor exploded in her mouth. It was the most delicious thing that she'd ever eaten, rich and creamy, with a small prick of salt. She'd never tasted anything so good. Apprehensively, she looked at the label. It was actually salted butter. She swallowed it down with glee. Before she could take another bite, a voice sounded out of the forest from the direction of the city. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up, the faint glow of flashlights darting across the forest behind her, searching. "Come on, Hector," she said in a rush while she shoved everything back in the bags. "We have to go. Now." Florence tried to stand, stumbling. Shaking it off as clumsiness, she tried to stand again but fell once more. She couldn't get up. Her legs wouldn't let her. She moved her legs around, testing them out. To her horror, her legs hardly worked at all. She couldn't run away. Beams of light filtered through the trees, illuminating bright patches in the dark night. Scurrying over to the nearest tree to hide from the lights, her eyes darted around, searching for something, anything that she could do. Too cold to think, she panicked. Her mind was frozen. She was too tired. Her body hurt too much. She couldn't do anything. Hector climbed onto her lap and hid his face in her chest. Florence struggled, lifting her knees up and wrapping her arms around both Hector and Millie. Their voices were closer now. Hot tears streamed down Florence's face. She could feel Hector whimpering in her arms. The voices grew closer. She could make out 2 distinct voices now. They were both Ghanaians. Her heart tried to beat out of her chest. Frozen with fear, some deep part of her mind started screaming. She had to do something, anything. Primal instinct took over, and she quickly started gathering all their bags in close. "Okay, Hector," she whispered. "We're going to play hide and seek now, okay? So I need you to be really quiet. Remember when we used to play it at home? Just like that. As quiet as you can. Don't make a noise, understand?" She forced herself to stop talking. She was rambling. And so Florence sat there, holding the only 2 things in the world that she cared about, as the Ghanaians approached. Closer and closer the Ghanaians came, laughing as they walked. Florence held her breath, waiting for the moment that they would find her. Plans sprouted in her mind. She would quickly hand Millie to Hector and tell him to run. Somehow, she'd hold them off long enough for the children to escape. She had to protect them, whatever it took. Heart racing, the Ghanaians rounded the tree and kept on walking right past them. She couldn't believe it. The Ghanaians walked on. Florence, losing sight of them through the trees, she let out a slow, tentative breath, still scared that they might hear her. It was too close for comfort. They had to get out of there before those Ghanaians came back. They'd both been carrying hunting rifles. "Hector, get off," she said. "We have to get going." Once Hector got off, Florence flexed and stretched her legs to try to get something to try to get them working again. Her muscles felt like a bundle of dry leather and old rubber bands. Using the tree for support, she managed to get up and onto unsteady legs. She bent down to pick up Millie's day bag, using only her back and abs. Florence bit back a grunt. Her back and abs may not have been hurting as much as her legs, but they still hurt. Fully standing, she let go of the tree. Her legs trembled, but held. She could support her own weight. Taking a small experimental step, she managed to stay upright. Hot lead filled her legs, but they moved, and that's what was important. They had to get away from there. The two Ghanaians could be back at any time. Staggering from the tree to tree, Florence, Millie, and Hector made their way in through the forest in the same direction the two Ghanaians had come from. Running simply wasn't an option anymore. Florence needed to find them another mode of transportation. At the edge of the forest, she saw what she'd been looking for, an old Ghanaian truck sitting at the end of the forest road. Inspecting the surroundings, she waited until she was sure that the truck was abandoned. It probably belonged to the Ghanaians that had passed them in the forest. Quietly, she approached with Hector, careful not to be seen by any other Ghanaians that she may have missed. With bated breath, Florence pulled on the handle on the driver's side. The door propped open. Sighing with relief, she lifted Hector into the car's passenger seat and placed Millie in his arms. Florence climbed into the driver's seat, then gingerly shut the door. Those Ghanaians didn't just walk through the forest for no reason. They must have heard Millie crying. That meant that they were in a hurry and possibly... Reaching into the cup holder, Florence felt the car's identity card, a smile blooming across her face as she slid the card in. The truck roared to life. Unfortunately, the inside of the truck was designed for someone much larger than Florence. Improvising, she adapted and overcame a size disadvantage by using one hand to steer and the other to operate the accelerator knob. She navigated the truck out of the forest, which proved to be more difficult than she'd expected. Florence was out of practice. She hadn't driven since Earth. Slowly, she got back into the groove and made it out of the forest. The drive was nerve-wracking. The seat belts were too large for both herself and Hector, and they were driving without the headlights for stealth. Normally, Florence would have never done anything so rash and unsafe, but she had to keep Millie and Hector safe. However, despite her attempts at stealth, the truck's engine made enough noise to wake the dead. To compensate for the lack of seatbelts, Florence was extremely careful, braking, turning, and accelerating as they made their way out of the forest and onto the main roads. Thinking of her survival lessons, she headed to one place she knew humans would be, the human zoo. With each species having different dietary requirements, including humans, most species governments found it was easiest to have their species' food centrally located in strategically chosen locations on worlds where their people lived. A lot of times these were placed in embassies, but the human food store was placed in a human retreat. Most humans got pretty homesick after a while, so these retreats had a wide variety of human foods, entertainment, and drinks. But most importantly, it had other humans. Florence had only been to the human zoo a couple times. She didn't particularly like it there. It lived up to its jokingly given name, as the most humans used it as a place to let loose. Florence preferred a nice quiet evening with a book over the night with rackers partying. It was still dark when they pulled up in front of the human food store. Flipping on the headlights, Florence quickly flipped them off again. Her eyes darted to the passenger seat. Hector was looking at Millie. Thankfully, he hadn't seen anything. The human zoo was a charred husk of its former glory. Racial slurs were scrawled all over the face of the building. She was sure, but she thought she might have also seen people hanging from trees out front, lynched and burned into oblivion. She reached up and swallowed it back down. She couldn't lose her stomach. Wiping her mouth, she paused. Something was tugging at the back of her mind. Steeling herself, she made sure Hector wasn't looking, then flipped the headlights back on. Trying to look but not see, she barely managed to flick the headlights off as Hector looked up. He looked up at her expectantly, Millie happily resting in his arms. She smiled back at him comfortingly, the thing still tugging at the back of her mind until suddenly it snapped into place. Someone had spray-painted 911 on the side of the building. 911 wouldn't mean anything to Ghanaians. It was an old Earth expression. That meant a human must have put it there. A hidden message she needed to solve. They clearly weren't telling her to go to the police or firefighters, since they were all Ghanaians. That could only mean one thing. They were telling her to go to the hospital. Of course, how had she not thought of it earlier? The Xeno hospital was the perfect place to go. Each species had such different anatomies that it would be impossible to expect local hospitals to care for all the off-worlders, so each major population hub had at least one hospital that specialized in caring for Xenos. Someone had written 911 on the side of the human zoo, knowing full well that only a human would realize it pointed them towards the hospital. Glass shattered behind her. Instinctively, Florence threw herself over the top of Hector and Millie. Another loud bang came from behind the truck, followed by a metallic ping from the truck's roof. Someone was shooting at them. Putting herself back into the driver's seat, she twisted the accelerator knob backwards as she turned the wheel. The truck spun around, facing the shooters. Flipping the headlights again, she heard someone in the distance cry out. Twisting the accelerator knob for as far as it would go, she threw the truck forward, swerving around a group of vehicles that hadn't been there before. A series of shots rang out on the driver's side of the truck. Blinding pain exploded from her side. She clutched her side, and the truck careened sideways. Letting go of her side, she grabbed hold of the steering wheel again, hand thick with blood. She threw her other arm in front of Hector and Millie to try and stop them from flying out of their seat. She wouldn't be able to use the accelerator knob anymore. Not that she needed to. Headlights lit up the night behind her. The shooters were coming after them. Pain overflowed inside Florence as she sideswiped cars and buildings, desperately trying to get the truck to do what she wanted. Tears welled in her eyes. Each impact shot pain through her body like lightning. The Xeno hospital was close to the human zoo. She just had to make it there. Everything would be fine if she could just get there. Barreling around a blind corner, she jerked the steering wheel just in time to avoid hitting another car head-on. She should have seen that. Black started to creep in from the side of her vision. The car swung around and joined the pursuit, rounding another corner. The back driver's side window shattered behind her head. A giant glowing H hovered in the air above a large building less than a dozen blocks away. More shots hit the truck, metal ricocheting off metal. The passenger side of the truck jerked up with a loud bang. The Ghanaians blew out one of her tires. Florence felt a shot graze her bad shoulder. She clamped down on a scream. Her vision tunneled, a pinprick of light at the end of a long tunnel. She bit down hard. Her tongue shot blood into her mouth. The tunnel widened. Shots rang out in front of her truck now, too, from the hospital. One of the cars behind her lurched and rolled into the air in a burst of flames. Blood slid behind her hand on the steering wheel as she veered out of the way of the fiery car. Shifting her hips, she tried to hip-slam her bullet wound into the truck door, but her hips just wouldn't move. The tunnel shrank. They were nearly there. She could see someone outside of the hospital waving at her. She had to get to them. She had to keep Hector and Millie safe, whatever it took. The tunnel closed around her. End of story. I would just like to thank the T5 supporters: Bushmaster 117, Casper Arnholtz, Draxzoon WRE, Elijah Silvercross, Gray, John Carrington, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.